Welcome everyone into another Ferrario Face-Off here at Claibs Online. I'm Alex Ferrario, the pre- and post-game host for the St. Louis Blues. With me, as always, is my good buddy Mike Claiborne, and talking about an eventful weekend because the Blues pick up that series sweep. They have a little bit of a win streak going right now. I know, Claibs. It was against the Anaheim Ducks, but
Yes.
still, at least we don't have to sit here and talk about, well, how can't this Blues team win a series? At least they finally got that monkey off their back.
Yeah, you know what? I think if you look back at this and if you were to say it was a split or they lost two games against Anaheim, then we really have some issues to talk about here.
Right.
They did what they were supposed to do. They went in and broke up all the furniture, ran a goalie. They did everything they needed to do. And you know what? Maybe that'll build the momentum. They've got Phoenix coming in or the Arizona Coyotes, who aren't much better. So now you build some momentum. And as I tweeted last night, now you may know why the Blues didn't fight going out to the Western Division, the Pacific Division, because they're going to see Anaheim. They're going to see the Arizona Coyotes. And you know what? For most part, they'll see San Jose. They're a similar team. And the Kings. I mean, so there are some teams they're supposed to beat, and the Blues were dominant in their role. And, you know, Alex, I got to tell you, I saw nothing in Anaheim. No fight, no anything. They had a guy who was their alleged tough guy who didn't even get a penalty the whole weekend. Yep. I mean, he was more concerned about trying to score than going out trying to really right some wrongs that were going on out there. And the Blues aren't that tough. I mean, Kyle Clifford can speak for himself, but the rest of them aren't that sort of hockey team, which is why they had to bring in Clifford. And he really didn't get challenged. I mean, he had a scrum with Getzlaff. And I thought that really said all you needed to know about this team, where your captain has to go out and get something started when you got a guy sitting on the fourth line at the end of the bench who's taking it all in as a spectator.
It's incredible, too, because a guy like Ryan Getzlaff, Claibs, I mean, he's seen the best of it. He won the Stanley Cup playing with guys like Corey Perry and Teemu Selanne and Chris Pronger. And then you've seen the worst of it these last couple of years. And this is a guy who's headed into unrestricted free agency. And much like Joe Thornton, who spent pretty much his entire career with the San Jose Sharks, finally decided to call it a career in that one place and make a move to at least have a shot at a Stanley Cup, which I would imagine Ryan Getzlaff is going to be doing. And, you know, I read a great piece over the weekend about the Anaheim Ducks, and it's the Mike Trout syndrome right now because John Gibson is an incredible goaltender. And look, the Blues did put 7 goals up on him in these last couple of days.
He didn't get a lot of help, though.
He had no help. It's the same thing that the Blues went through with Ville Husso. I mean, if nobody's going to defend in front of you, what are you supposed to do? Yeah. But John Gibson's about to enter the stage of his contract where the no movement clause comes in, and Anaheim's going to be committing about $7.5 million to him. But if you're John Gibson, you're thinking, man, this team's going nowhere anytime fast, which is why the Blues had to pounce on this opportunity. And a lot of people I've heard since last night on the postgame Claib saying, well, you know, the Blues, they evened the series with the LA Kings. They should have swept that one. I think the LA Kings are a better team than what we're giving them credit for compared to this Anaheim Ducks team.
Yeah, Anaheim's going no place fast. So let me run this by you as we talk about Gibson. Will there be a run on goaltending where there'll be some teams in need or in search of one as we get deeper into the season? I know in baseball, everybody's looking for pitching. When you look around at the good teams, they all seem like the goaltending is reasonably solid. But with the way the schedule is set up and the 2-2 games, and it seems like nobody can sweep, will that be an issue where a team just might want to get better on that second night compared to what they already have?
It's a great question, Claves. Chris Kerber and I talked about this on the postgame last night because, one, the trade deadline, in my opinion, this season is going to be so interesting because of the quarantine period that comes into play and then the work visa issues if you're bringing somebody from Canada like we're seeing with Patrick Laine right now. I wonder if teams are going to be as aggressive at the trade deadline because of those work visa and because of that quarantine. And Kerber responded to me with, the one thing I see a lot of teams being aggressive with is goaltending. And take the Blues, for example. I liked Ville Husso's game. We'll get into this in just a bit. I liked his game. But if I'm the Blues and if I'm Doug Armstrong, I'm looking at this team and saying the one place that I need to make sure I'm ready for is my goaltending depth. Because if something happens to Jordan Binnington, do you feel comfortable with Ville Husso playing a majority of the games or an entire postseason series? I imagine, Claves, that you're going to see a lot of teams that are at the top of their division or trying to win one of those top 4 spots, loading up on goaltenders to make sure that they have 3 solid guys that they can depend on because they get to carry 3 goalies all season.
Yeah, that's a good point you make. And the fact that we haven't seen enough of Husso to know whether he can carry the load or not is also a challenge. I mean, nobody knew what Bennington can do. The only reason Bennington got a shot was because Jake Allen was so bad at that point. Right. And you have to look back and you say, all right, is there another Jordan Bennington somewhere in the organization? Well, we don't know because Bennington's going to play a lot. And I think it'll be incumbent upon Husso just to stay ready, and how he prepares for a National Hockey League season is going to be something we'll all have to watch. But a Gibson could be an interesting guy. Mm-hmm. But do you think, in your point about the quarantine, do you think teams will be aggressive early compared to later?
You have to be, in my opinion. I mean, you look at the trade deadline, it is, I believe it's that April, or it's the March, it's like March 8th or March 14th or something like that. So you figure if you make a deal on March 14th, Claibs, and I was looking at this last night for the Blues, hypothetically, the Blues pull off a deal on March 14th. Well, that's a 2-week quarantine, takes you to that last Tuesday in March. And if there's any work visa issues, you could potentially not have the player for 6, maybe 7 games. So, and we all know trade deadlines in hockey is so interesting because when you make that deal, you got to not only get the guy on the ice, but you have to get him acclimated to that locker room. You have to get him acclimated to that system. Goaltenders are a little different because they do their own thing in net with the system in front of them. But I do see teams that are going to make moves be aggressive by the beginning of March, maybe the end of February, to make sure that they get those guys within the locker room. And John Gibson's a really interesting one because if you're Anaheim, you can get a hell of a haul for a guy like that who becomes a number 1 goaltender. Keep an eye on the Colorado Avalanche. I think Colorado is going to go out there and make a splash for a goaltender at some point this season because, look, Pavel Francois, along with trying to think of what the guy's name is. They're starting goaltender. That's where life is these days. Yeah. Grubauer, thank you. They got these 2, and they like these 2.
But can they win with these 2?
And you win with these 2 because last year you couldn't. They got swept, or they got knocked out in the first round by the Dallas Stars. So watch for Colorado to either make a play for a guy like John Gibson or make a play for a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury from the Las Vegas Golden Knights.
See, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to make that deal within the conference. I don't think you want to, especially 2 teams you're going to directly compete against. Well, certainly Colorado and Vegas. But, the other thing that comes into this, I'm probably going to be doing dealing around Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to need that 2-week window from quarantine, if I'm bringing a guy in from Canada, I want to make sure that he gets as much time to get acclimated compared to being in a rush on the back end of that where I wouldn't have him until the middle of March. Right. So I may be a little bit more aggressive on this one and try and get the deal done. And I think that if you're a Canadian team, that's probably what you should be thinking of. If you're trying to move a guy, it may be more conducive to say to a team, hey, you better get him now because by the time you get him at the deadline, you may not be able to use him until it's too late or you don't know what you actually have. So it's a bargaining chip I think the Canadian teams will probably have at their disposal more than anything else, which should kind of move the needle. Let's talk a little bit about this hockey team. I know you wanted to talk about Husso. So give me your thoughts on him and what you've seen so far.
I was thinking of this last night while I'm watching this game, Claibs. I liked Ville Husso's game. I really did.
What do you like best about? Is he good glove hand, good movement with the puck with his stick?
He doesn't allow rebounds. This was something that plagued Jake Allen for the Blues. He didn't swallow up those rebounds, and next thing you know, you're getting those second and third chances. But what I liked about Ville Husso's game was the fact that the Blues were sloppy in that first period on Sunday night. I mean, they allowed turnover after turnover. They were making so many questionable plays in their own zone, Claibs. And the biggest thing for me from my goaltender is making those saves when the team is still trying to figure out what they're doing on the ice. And Husso kept it a 1-0 game last night, all the way up till that big leg save that he had in the second period on the 2-on-1 chance. And that was the momentum shifter. That turned into Braden Shen scoring the goal, tying the game, and the Blues getting on that high horse and winning that hockey game. It reminded me a lot of what Jordan Binnington did when he first came into the league in the Cup run, where he kept the Blues in the game while they were still searching for their game. And they finally got to the point where they're like, okay, our goaltender's good. Let's go out and play our hockey game. So that's what I loved about Husso. Now, the one caveat for me, Claves, they did it against the Anaheim Ducks. And Husso's two other games were against the Colorado Avalanche, where he allowed 4 goals in the third period, and then the LA Kings, who I think are a very good team, more than what people are giving them credit for, but he allowed 6 goals in that one. Now, to defend Husso, the team in front of him played poorly. They played better against Anaheim on Sunday. But before I buy stock into this Ville Husso situation, I really want to see him against a competitive team like the Minnesota Wild, like the Colorado Avalanche, like the Vegas Golden Knights. I want to see if he looks like he did Sunday against one of those two teams.
Well, the big challenge will be how you're able to get him in those games, because they obviously all are important, and you want Binnington ready to go. So it's a juggling match, and how they figure it out, well, we'll have to wait and see. As far as the games last night and Saturday night, I saw a different hockey team with respect to effort. I saw a different hockey team with respect to back checking. And the fact that we had multiple guys scoring gave me the indication that, this is not just a one-line hockey team. And I guess the other star in this thing, I know we talked about Kyrou before, but what's Justin Falk drinking now? Because this is the guy who I think Doug Armstrong was trying to bring in last year.
Yeah.
His minutes are up and the productivity is up as well.
Yeah, he has been the biggest turnaround player for the St. Louis Blues. And I'm saying that over a Jordan Kyrou, because there were still some high expectations for Jordan Kyrou. But, Claibs, you know this, Justin Falk was going under the Eric Brewer method, basically where everyone despised him because the trade, they connected it to Alex Pietrangelo. But look, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of the reasons he's not a flashy player, he's not what you call a dynamic skater.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I told you earlier, he's the master of the 5-foot outlet pass.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do anything exceptional except be in position.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's denying a puck or maybe he's hitting somebody who's cutting through the neutral zone. He's got his head up all the time, and I think that's important. And he never panics with the puck, and that's something that a lot of defensemen, and I think that's one of the things that cost Vince Dunn ice time, the fact that he'll panic with it compared to just taking his time and letting the game come to him. Again, he's not a flashy guy. He'll never confuse you with Paul Coffey or anybody like that. He just job done, and you know what? I guess that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's great because I think he matches what this Blues team wanted, and it was just a matter of finding a spot on the ice. Joe Vitale makes the great analysis of saying he needed to find a home with this Blues team, and last year he couldn't find it. It just wasn't making sense. It wasn't clicking. And, I mean, look at it now, Claibs. He's getting the second most ice time among defensemen for the St. Louis Blues, which is showing confidence in him. And the part that really stands out to me, and I know the plus-minus is really a fickle stat in hockey, but right now for Justin Falk, being a +10, which is leading the National Hockey League, is so impressive because if you go back to last year, Claibs, he had 16 games where he was a minus in a hockey game, meaning he was on the ice for more goals scored than what he was on the ice for goals scored for the Blues. This season, he's got one game, and I know we're 9 games in right now, but he's got one game where he's been on the ice for more goals allowed than goals scored by the Blues. It's turning a new leaf for Justin Falk. So he is stepping his game up, which is helping this Blues team do what they've been doing. One player I want to talk with you about, Claibs, and this hit me last night, is a guy not only I think goes underrated for the Blues, but is underrated in the National Hockey League. And it's Braden Shen. I mean, if you look at what Shen is doing now this season, it's a 7-game point streak where he's tied for first in the National Hockey League. But I went back and looked at this last night, Claibs. He has the most goals, assists, points, even strength goals, power play goals, game-winning goals since he's been acquired by the Blues in 2017. He leads the team. This is a guy I feel, and I'd love your thoughts on this. I feel people don't give him enough credit for what he does for this Blues team.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And you know what? He's a two-way player. I mean, he's just not goal driven. I mean, defensively, he finds a way to get back. He's tough. He will go. Doesn't have to, but he is willing. And the fact that he can do a lot of things, whether it's score goals, he's a very good passer. Again, but he's not a flashy guy. But at the end of the night, you look at the score sheet and you say, "Whoa, this guy had 2 points," or
right.
He's a +3. His guy that he was checking didn't do very much. He does a lot of little things. Now, with that said, I think one of the things that we look at with him, he can be streaky. He can get hot and carry you for 8-9 games, and then he may disappear for 3 or 4. Right. And those 3 or 4 come at a time when you're looking for him because that's what you expect. But I think consistency-wise, he's probably one of the most consistent forwards the Blues have on their roster right now.
And it's interesting, too, because, of course, he's at the center position where a lot of people want to see what Robert Thomas has to offer as a top 6 center. And Thomas and Hoffman right now have gone quiet for the Blues, and I still believe that's going to get there. It's just a matter of understanding each other. But I would imagine there's some frustration for a Robert Thomas who thought this was the year he's going to get to prove himself. Schenn was going to play on the wing, but goodbye Craig Berube, who is no bull with this team. If you're not performing, you're not going to play in that position. And right now, Schenn is a better centerman than a winger. So Robert Thomas, if he wants one of those top 6 spots, he's got to perform like he is a better centerman than Braden Schenn and Ryan O'Reilly.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. And you know what? One of the things, Alex, he was kind of given that opportunity at the beginning, starting with training camp in the first couple of games, and it just wasn't there. He wasn't skating. He was holding on to it too long, wasn't looking for a shot. There were a couple of games where he didn't even have a shot.
Right.
And you ask yourself the question, wait a minute, you're getting 16 minutes a night and you're nowhere to be found. And with as good of a skater as he is, you would expect more. And he's kind of lost right now. I don't think there's any question about it. And how you fix it, I don't know, but I'm not going to reward him by making him a top 6 forward. He's got to earn that opportunity. And let's face it, the third line of the St. Louis Blues, no matter who the wingers are going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, Hoffman's a pretty good hockey player. He hasn't found it yet. And no matter who you plug in on the other side, Perron or whomever, those guys are going to get a really good look. So this isn't like your traditional checking line of a third line. This is a line that can certainly have the ability to score some goals, especially when you think about who they're going to be matched up with from a third line opposition.
That's the part that gets me. I mean, they're going to have the most favorable matchups of any third line, I feel like, in this West Division, because just go through the other teams. I mean, if a Mike Hoffman and a Robert Thomas, and right now, I would imagine you're going to put Vladimir Tarasenko on that line when he comes back. I mean, you're talking about those 3 playing against the third and fourth line on other teams, because right now the top defensive line's going up against Schenn, Schwartz, and Kyrou, and that number 2 line, of course, is going against Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron. So it's just a matter of getting those 2 going. And the hard part right now is just Mike Hoffman with Thomas. And I think you could see some of that frustration for him. And I still think it's for Mike Hoffman learning this system. And, I've talked with Joe, who's talked to Mike Hoffman. It's not easy to go on to a team and not have a full preseason and not kind of understand what that roster looks like and how they perform. So I think he's going to get there. I'll tell you the one line move that I'd love to see. And, of course, Craig Berube has no care what I have to say about this. But Oscar Sundqvist on that line with Thomas and Hoffman, that could be some producing for that St. Louis Blues and really could get Thomas and Hoffman going, because Craig Berube loves Sundqvist and he calls him his Mr. Fix-It on this team because you could plug him in anywhere and he has success. Right now you're winning, so you're not going to change things up. But I'd like to see Sundqvist up there to see if you get those 2 going.
Well, here's where Sundqvist is intriguing. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife, but he's a guy that's willing to go in the corner and do the dirty work.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's willing to stand in front of the net and take a cross check. He's a guy that can give you a good outlet pass, and defensively, he's a guy that can come back and maybe cover the back door, considering that Hoffman and Thomas are still trying to learn how to play defense in the National Hockey League. This is a guy that Sundqvist could probably buy those guys some time to focus on other things and while he does the dirty work.
Yeah, and I really want to see him on the ice with those two. One more, Claibs, I want to get to with you, and that's the opponent that's coming up this week for the Blues. They take the Arizona Coyotes on Tuesday, then they got the Coyotes on Thursday, and another set of back-to-back Saturday, Sunday against the Colorado Avalanche. I know Arizona's first up, but you really have to look at that Colorado Avalanche team. Arizona's been struggling. Arizona is still dangerous. But the last time the Blues and the Avalanche met, things weren't right. It was that even split, that 8-0 loss. Colorado now, they lost the other night to Minnesota to snap a 3-game win streak, but they're dealing with some injuries. They lost Nathan McKinnon in that hockey game. They're without a couple of other players. I think this is going to be a different game compared to those first two that started the season off for the Blues and Avalanche.
Oh, I don't think there's any question that we're going to see a different look. Hockey players have good memories about being embarrassed. And this is one that I thought was one of the most embarrassing losses maybe Craig Berube's had since he's been here.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be on the hook for an 8-0 loss. And you weren't good in any three of the zones. So I would expect there to be a little bit more concentration put forth in this series against Colorado. But knowing Craig Berube, he'll worry about Colorado when they get to the
Right.
rink. There's some games at hand that you have, let's face it, you should win those 2 games against Arizona.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I know they're struggling and they probably got some other issues that they've got to rectify, but you still have to go out and remind them that you are the St. Louis Blues and they're not. And
Right.
if you don't, then we've gone back to square one of the inconsistency that really troubled the Blues early. But Alex, when you look around the league, it's troubling a lot of teams. It is hard. I mean, hard to win 2 in a row in this way it's set up, because even if you're in a home team, I mean, there's no fan presence. There's nothing that gives you a decided advantage other than sleeping in your own bed. And I think it's starting to show that these games and these teams are more evenly matched than you think.
Yeah, and frankly, teams need to take advantage of the points when they have the opportunity to, because just look at this West Division right now, Claibs. I mean, you have the Blues sitting for a tie with first place with the Colorado Avalanche, but, I mean, Vegas has been suspended some play because of the COVID situation that they're dealing with, but you still have Anaheim, Minnesota all sitting within a couple of points of each other. And frankly, you got the LA Kings and you got the Coyotes that are sitting within like 4 or 5 points of each other. So right now is the opportunity for the Blues to build off of that and keep a win streak going. Because if you can create separation in your division early, it's going to make those latter part of the season games where things are a little bit tiring and you're playing a lot in a little amount of time. That's the games where if you falter a little bit, it doesn't affect you, rather than faltering at the beginning of the season and having to go undefeated from March on.
Question for you with regard to, you mentioned Vegas. What are you hearing with regard to reschedule and how these games are going to be made up? Because, there are a few teams that are now dealing with having some games postponed. So what's been the plan and what do you think we'll see it implemented?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, the people don't know, Vegas suspended the 2 San Jose games that they were supposed to play over the weekend after that Thursday one that they canceled last week because of the positive COVID test. The GM is supposed to talk today. I would imagine what they're going to do is they're going to turn those 2-game sets into 3-game sets against the team. So the Blues play in Vegas that last weekend of the season in April. I don't know if that works out best for the NHL because you don't want to push the postseason back at all. And so what I think they might do, and this is just speculation right now, but at least I would imagine the NHL would consider putting Vegas in that March set where the Blues play Vegas in St. Louis, and maybe they go out to Vegas on Wednesday, play them. It's the second week of March where the Blues have like 5 days off. Maybe they play in Vegas on Wednesday, and then they come back to St. Louis to play Vegas on Friday and Sunday. And if that doesn't work, then maybe you have Vegas come into St. Louis and make them the home team, because let's be honest, it's a neutral site anyway with not many fans in the stands. So
speaking of fans, there are going to be some fans at the Enterprise Center this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to work.
I love it, Claibs. And, I thought Braden Chin had the best quote about it. He said 1,400 fans are going to feel like 10,000 fans for these guys who have been listening to basically syndicated crowd noises in the stadiums. They had that in Anaheim. But it's cool it's great for the St. Louis Blues, one, because they're kind of the model that other teams, at least in St. Louis and other companies in St. Louis, are going to mold their direction after, because they started with 200, 300 people of frontline workers in the stands. And that resulted in them saying, okay, this was progressive, so now we got to go to the next step. And they bring in 1,400 people. So I hope that this is successful, because if this is successful, you just keep growing. And maybe by the postseason, you can get to the point where you have and something feels a little bit more normal. But I mean, you know this, Claibs, the Cardinals are going to be watching what the Blues do. You're going to have all of the college basketball teams like the Billikens and the Missouri Tigers watching what the St. Louis Blues do. And frankly, you're going to have a lot of companies that are going to be doing the same thing. So this is the start of hopefully getting back to normal. And I'm glad the Blues are at the front end of this one.
All right. Some fun hockey this week for sure.
I can't wait for it. Blues and Coyotes on Tuesday night. Then they play Thursday. And as we talked about, it's back-to-back against the Colorado Avalanche. Claibs, thanks for hopping on and talking a little hockey with me today, buddy.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
There you go. That's Mike Claiborne. I'm Alex Ferrario. Another edition of the Ferrario Face-Off. We'll be back with you later this week talking about the reaction from that Coyote series right here at Claibs Online.